So today we have a familiar story, right? In fact, when Alvaro asked me what scriptures we were using in this Dreaming God's Dream series, our season of annual giving and generosity, and when I told him that we were using the story of the Good Samaritan today, he said, "Oh my gosh, again? Seriously, we've talked about the Good Samaritan so much. Can't we pick something else?" He's like, "I can't preach the Good Samaritan story again. I am picking something else." We try to do the same themes on Sunday and Wednesdays, but yeah, he was not having it. And he's not wrong, right? We have heard the story of the Good Samaritan more than once in the past year or so. Everyone's nodding their heads. Some people and some of you might not remember, and that's all right. And some of you, it might be your first time here, and we're really glad that you're here for the Good Samaritan, because apparently we love it here at CCSM. But you know, I have to ask, I have to wonder if there's a reason that this story keeps showing up. I have to wonder if God is trying to tell us something. Because if we look around in our world, in our country, clearly we still need this story, don't we? Now, usually when we talk about this parable, we focus on the Samaritan, the one who stops, who binds wounds, who takes care of the hurting man on the side of the road and shows mercy. But Saint Augustine reminds us that there is another character that we often overlook. He's not mentioned much. In fact, just the last couple of verses of our passage today, and that is the innkeeper. The innkeeper. Have you thought about the innkeeper when you've heard this story before? Not really, right? The Samaritan doesn't just help this man on the side of the road, he brings him to an inn. And after caring for him, he then entrusts this man to the innkeeper and says, "Take care of him. I'll pay whatever the cost is, just take care of him." And then the innkeeper says yes and becomes the one who provides healing and shelter and food and time for recovery, and we can hope restoration. The innkeeper becomes part of this sacred work. Now, I think it's worth remembering that there is another pretty popular story about an inn in our scriptures, aren't there? The gospel coming up here at the end of the year. What was that, Alvaro? No more room at the inn, right? Jesus' birth story. No more room in the inn. And then we have this story, this parable of an inn where the innkeeper says, yes, there is room here. Hospitality denied, hospitality extended. It's a tension that is throughout the Bible. Over and over, these sacred stories across generations remind us that when we make space for strangers, whether it's Abraham welcoming visitors, or Rahab sheltering spies, or Lydia opening her home to Paul, God shows up again and again and again. And when hospitality is refused, well, that's when we miss this opportunity, this call, this invitation to join God in this holy and sacred work of restoration. I want to pause here for a second to remind us of what an inn meant in the ancient world. Inns just weren't a bed or a place where you could lay yourselves down for a night of sleep. They were not a Motel 6 along the side of a highway that you said, when we enter that state, we'll stop there. They were way stations on these long, treacherous roads, places where travelers could rest and eat and recover. They were community hubs, places where news was exchanged and stories and resources, where business happened. And because people were often traveling with animals, they became a place of sanctuary and shelter for all of God's creation. But these inns weren't just about shelter. As I said earlier, they are about connection and safety and being a point of respite so that people could continue on their journey. So when the Samaritan entrusts, I love that word. Alvaro used it on Wednesday night, so I'm stealing it this morning. When the innkeeper entrusts the wounded man to the innkeeper, or when the Samaritan entrusts the wounded man to the innkeeper, he's entrusting him to continue the work that he's begun. This past week, I read a story in the Texas Monthly. Don't judge me. I still do have some of my Texas subscriptions, and I like to stay informed of what's happening. And this article featured a church in the Austin area called Sunrise Community Church. And this church has been targeted by Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas. When God says, pray for your enemies, I pray for him often. They've been targeted for helping people experiencing homelessness. This church runs what they call a navigation center. And it is a place where people can pick up prescriptions, collect mail, get food, meet with caseworkers, all in one location. I believe they're in the South Austin area. And they're in a neighborhood. There's a school a few blocks that way. There's homes, there's restaurants. There's also a pretty large encampment about 300 yards from the church. And their pastor, Mark Hibelink, said that we found that once people were stable, once they had support, they stayed on their meds, they stayed out of the ER, they stayed out of jail, and they were able to get their life back. But what struck me most of everything that he said, that I read about, the amazing work that they are doing, was a statistic. And that statistic is that there are about 3,000 churches in Austin. Right, it is wild to wrap your head around that. But Pastor Hibelink said that if each of these 3,000 churches served just 2 people experiencing homelessness, then they wouldn't need day centers. If each church just supported 2 people, they would not need these day centers. He went on to write, but too often, Christianity has become a club, a place of exceptionalism, and that's really sad. This is what happens when the church forgets its call to be an inn for all travelers on their journey. You know, last week we talked about seeds. We had those mustard seeds. If you can imagine those rattling in my hand again. We talked about these seeds that were planted generations ago, seeds that grew into the beautiful sanctuary that we find ourselves sitting in today, finding rest under the shelter of its branches in this room, on this campus, online. And this week, we're talking about that shelter itself, the inn of the Congregational Church of San Mateo. You know, our mission statement actually names us as a spiritual hub here on the peninsula. That is one of the things that we are striving to be. And if you take that description of what an ancient inn's role was in the community life, I have to think that a spiritual hub is a nice, fancy, modern word for saying an inn, right? We are innkeepers. We are entrusted to open our doors wide and say yes when others say no, to create a space and foster a community where healing and transformation can actually happen. I want you to think about all of the lives that are touched by this church, by this campus, by this inn every single week. Did you know that we have 6 different 12-step groups that find recovery here? We have organizations like the Housing and Leadership Council, One San Mateo, the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, that have meetings here to work on housing and justice issues and to sustain the leaders that are doing that work in our community and beyond. We have Homework Central, the intercommunal school, the Muslim Children's Garden, Little Wonders. Not only are there preschool classrooms, but those communities meet here for board meetings and planning sessions and parent meetings. And it's not just the meetings and the groups that happen here. Our halls ring with music from choirs like Bella Voce and the San Francisco Boys Choir. If you've ever been in my office on a Tuesday or Thursday afternoon for a meeting, you have heard the San Francisco Boys Choir. We have health clinics and legal consultations, small groups. There's laughter, there's tears, there's coffee, there's lots of food, there's lots of prayer. And yes, we actually offer overnight shelter as well. Hundreds of people pass through these doors and walk on our campus and join us online, seeking care and community. And it's not just the groups that are already here who have been here. Just this past Friday, I had 2 people reach out to me. One was looking for a place where they could do a family assessment for someone who lived in the neighborhood because the mother had a transportation problem, and it was easy for her to get here, but not to the school she needed to be. And another is a doctor, reaching out about offering a free medical clinic here, similar to what we did in the spring. And you know what? Because of your gifts, because of your generosity, because the ways that you dream God's dream, we can say yes. We can say yes. I imagine that innkeeper, I've never had an inn. It's been kind of a dream of mine to own a bed and breakfast one day. That's for retirement, right? But I imagine that innkeeper had a million other things on his to-do list. Other things, schedules, employees to work with, repairs to make, guests to tend to. But when the Samaritan showed up and asked, he said, yes. And we get to say yes to these good Samaritans that come to our door. And that is nowhere more visible right now than in our growing partnership with the Samaritan House. Monday through Friday, afternoon into the early evening, where we are able to welcome guests and serve a meal, provide some take-home meals, and more importantly, a place for people to belong and find connection. But I do not want to be the one to talk about the Samaritan House today. Today, I want to invite up two of our very active volunteers and leaders in our community, Katherine Vega-Stultz, who is the chair of our Ministry of Service and Justice right now, Katherine, and then Jim Granucci, who is our Samaritan House Volunteer Coordinator. They're going to come up here and talk a little bit more about this ministry and the generosity that takes place each week and why they serve. Thank you. Katherine?
Thank you, and good morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to what inspires me as we consider our pledge for annual giving. I think we can all agree, as we've already heard today, that the world is a little bit upside down. It is difficult sometimes to shut it out and not let it deeply impact your soul. For me, CCSM is that grounding place. Although I or no one here can change the world, we absolutely can impact someone by every action we lean in on as part of this faith community. As I step into the leadership of MSJ, I have one key goal: maximize every incredible action we already do, share it widely, visibly, loudly, proudly. The service being done in this community can be very centering amongst the chaos that's all around us, and the impact is real. So I'd like to bring a few concepts together as we think about our annual pledge. First, this is a personal decision. Money and planning, it's important and it's needed. But also consider the personal pledge of your time. Last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago, I had the opportunity to serve in Kloss Hall, and I went around a few tables to get some feedback from some of our clients. I just shared 2 quotes. Sharing a table and building a community, this is worth so much to me. And I just say thank you to everyone who makes this happen. Second quote, I come here to do more than eat. We are building relationships in a community I've never had. I'm treated with dignity here. It's hard to imagine that a little over a year ago, that our commitment to serve these daily meals in collaboration with the Samaritan House was just an idea. I can imagine there was a lot of angst, logistics, factors that may have been challenging, but in the end, we said yes. And on any given day, from 4 to 6, a small but mighty crew assembles in Kloss Hall, opening the doors to our neighbors in need. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim to share a little bit more about what exactly we are doing.
Thank you, Katherine. It's a real joy to be here this afternoon or this morning to talk to you about Samaritan House. I want to personally thank our moderator and our board for approving this connection with Samaritan House. Historically, we in the past, we've served as kind of a focal point for those that need assistance in San Mateo. And with Samaritan House, that's expanded significantly. We currently, this past year, served about 25,000 that came through our doors and picked up meals here. And about half those stay and enjoy a meal with us in Kloss Hall. For many, it's an opportunity to be together, to spend an hour with their friends and with new people they've met. And for me, it's really rewarding to see that kind of experience. Volunteers, we've had a significant number of volunteers, not only from our church, but from the Catholic Church, the Episcopal Church, AME, that have come here to work with us, as well as community members. We're really becoming a focal point for those that are in need in San Mateo. And for me, that's rewarding because we can go ahead and refer them to Samaritan House, Life Moves, or whatever services they might need. Our volunteers for our church We've done about 150 volunteer days that members of this church have contributed to that program. And I really want to take just a moment to recognize, if you've ever served or been involved with Samaritan House, I'd ask you to just stand for a moment. Thank you. And I want to pay special recognition to Peter Pearson. Peter, can you stand for a moment? This young man has been at Samaritan House almost every day since we opened a year ago. And it's really a tribute to somebody that's retired but now has taken on a new role. And Peter, we really want to thank you for that time that you've been with us. And Katherine, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So look at the impact, the numbers of meals, the people we have served, and not only that, opening our doors to people in need, as well as volunteers that get to know more about us and our community, and people like Peter that dedicate every day at the end of the table, making sure the milk and the water is organized in an incredible way so that people feel welcome. I did get also a few quotes from some of the volunteers, just to bring that forward. If you haven't had the opportunity to donate a couple of hours of your time. Monday through Friday, all year long, a group of CCSM volunteers commit to help out. In addition, we recruit people from the Samaritan House, favorites being mother-daughter teams or parent-child teams, all rolling up their sleeves to welcome guests and distribute food. It's fast-paced, sometimes a little chaotic, but it's definitely fun. Another quote, supporting Samaritan House is one of the most visible ways we at CCSM are the hands and feet of God. As we help Samaritan House feed the community in need, we are creating stronger bonds within our own community. So think about the buzz that is possible when we not only open our doors for our neighbors in need, but also lean in and get to know each other a little bit better, rolling up our sleeves, doing anything and every job. There's always an hour, and I promise you the return of investment of that time is far greater than anything you have in your portfolio. I would like to also thank one very important person, and that is Jim. As I mentioned earlier, I have no idea what happened behind the scenes to get this organized off the ground, angst. I leaned in when there was a second hour, and the lovely people from Samaritan House came and told us how they would support our church community to pull this off. But nothing is possible without the commitment of Jim and then all the other volunteers that lean in on a daily basis. So I want to thank you all for your consideration and service, and be curious about how you can already make a bigger impact in our community. We all have an hour or two that we can lean in and serve, and think about the various things. We've talked about Samaritan House today, but we can think about Call Primrose. Somebody's got to deliver those olive oil. We can think about today is the fourth Sunday of the month, and we'll be making sandwiches in the kitchen for Open Cathedral. Please talk to Becky Duffy if you're interested. We can think about our home San Mateo and Reverend Alvaro and how much he leans into that program. They're having a planning meeting this evening in our church. We can think about so many things that can just return so much. The song that we've been singing, Dream, God's Dream, I would like to just pull out a quote. I wasn't planning on doing this, but as we were singing it this morning, I think it resonates. I'm dreaming of the call God is offering to me, how to use my energy and my best gifts, and to do so, and to do the work of Christ. Thank you very much.
I just have one last comment, and I'd be remiss if I didn't speak to it. We have one of the clients that came to us intoxicated when he showed up. He's now 100 days sober and a member of AA. He pledges that because of the relationship that we've built with him at Samaritan House and here at Claus Hall. So it's really it's one person, but it's changed his life. And for me, it's really a rewarding thing to see somebody really turn their life around. So thank you.